How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, August 16th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on you, Darvish. The elite starting pitcher for the San Diego Padres turns 35 today. And for this episode, I'm going to, of course, go through his accomplishments, his accolades, and just show what he's been able to accomplish from the moment he became a professional phenom as a high schooler in Japan, through becoming one of Japan's most storied pitchers in all of its history, to moving to the MLB, and then of course achieving accolades that very few pitchers receive in what many people say is the world's toughest baseball league. So, if you're not familiar with Yu Darvish, he is originally out of Osaka, Japan. I would say he has incredible command, and I think a lot of that comes down to his confidence, because I think baseball is definitely a mental game, and of course he does have the physical ability to just throw the ball 90 miles per hour or 95, 100 miles per hour very consistently, and he's very great with his curves. He knows what he's doing, and I don't know. I think he has a very controlling sense of command, and I think it's proven very successful for him when he's definitely needed him to. So, I guess, like I said, the big thing to know about him is that he played high school ball in Japan. He would get drafted to come play. I mean, he was scouted by major league teams, but he would eventually go and play in the Nippon Professional League in Japan. He would, of course, he would be the 14th player in NPB history to throw a complete game shutout as a rookie out of high school. He, in his 2006 season, that was his breakout year, he would go on to finish with a 12-5 record and a 2.89 ERA. He would go on to finish as the Asia Series most valuable player. So he was becoming more and more he was playing more and more of a contributing role. In the very next season, in 2007, he would actually be the season opening starting pitcher. And by the end of that season, he would go on to be the youngest player to reach the 200 million yen mark in terms of what he was making in his contract. So as he was continuing to play and move up through the ranks, he would become the Pacific League MVP twice. He won the Eiji Sawamura Award, which is given to the best starting pitcher, which is basically their Cy Young Award. He won that in 2007. He won the Japan Series in 2006, which, of course, is the championship series to the top baseball team in Japan. So that's their World Series. He would go on to lead the Pacific League in strikeouts 3 times in 2007, 2010, and 2011. He would go on to lead the league in ERA. He had the ERA title in 2009 and 2010. So he already had the strikeout title and the ERA title in 2010. And he will go on to have the Best 9 award, which is given to the best pitcher, roughly. He was given the Golden Glove. He was also named an All-Star in the league 5 consecutive years from 2007 to 2011. And right when he was finished with his stint in Japan, he decided that he would go on to take on the bigger challenge and play with the Texas Rangers in the MLB to, of course, seek out his next challenge. And once he already made it to the Rangers, he was coming into his age 25 season. So by then he was, just to give a sense of how young he was when he made the move, but he was already so tenured after being a 5-time All-Star in Japan. He entered his very first season for the Texas Rangers in 2012, age 25. He would start all 29 of the games that he would play in a season where the Texas Rangers would finish with a 93-69 record. They finished with the second best record in the AL West. And this was following the 2 consecutive years that the Rangers had made it to the World Series and lost. But in Yu Darvish's very first season there, he would finish with a 16-9 record, holding a 3.90 ERA over 191 innings. In those 191 innings, he would allow 156 hits, which is 35 about less hits than innings pitched, and he struck out 221 batters, which would go down as 30 more strikeouts than innings pitched. He will go down as an all-star in his very first season. He would finish third in Rookie of the Year voting in the American League, and this was the year that the American League Rookie of the Year ended up going to Mike Trout, and he also finished behind Yoenis Cespedes after his debut season, so that's how good Yu Darvish was. He would go on to finish ninth in Cy Young voting in that year. The Cy Young was given to David Price in Tampa Bay. But that's just to give a sense as to who Yu Darvish was. At the conclusion of his very first season, in which he was named an All-Star, the Rangers would end up losing in the AL wild card to the Orioles. Just to remind everyone how that season went. And following that season, Yu Darvish would come back for a second season in Dallas. In his age 26 season, he would start all 32 games that he would play in a season where the Rangers finished with a 91-72 record. They won 2 less games than the previous season, but at the conclusion of it all, they had lost. Or I guess they had won. They just missed out on the playoffs that season. But Yu Darvish would finish with a 13-9 record with a 2.83 ERA, which is actually the lowest ERA that he has had, at least on the Rangers, in a full season. He would go on to pitch 209 innings, which is the most innings that he has ever pitched in a season. He allowed 145 hits in those 209 innings, which is 64 less hits than innings pitched. He would allow, that would be 64. And then he would go on to strike out 277 batters in those 209 innings, which is 68 more strikeouts than innings pitched. And he would go on to lead the American League in strikeouts for the only time that he would in his MLB career. He would eventually go on to lead the National League in wins, and he's never led the league in ERA, but this is the only time that he's led the American League in strikeouts, so this would go down as a career year for him. He will be named an All-Star in his second straight year, of course, in his second year in the league. He would go on to finish second in the Cy Young voting this season. This is the year the Cy Young was given to Max Scherzer for his season with the Tigers, mainly probably because the Tigers made the playoffs that season. But that should give a sense as to how dominant Yu Darvish was when he first came in the league. And this is when he was fresh off of being like the most sought-after commodity in Japanese athletics. And following that season, he would come back to the Rangers for his third season, his age 27 year in 2014. He would start all 22 of the games that he would play in a season that the Texas Rangers would finish with a 67-95 record on the year. In 2014, Yu Darvish would actually become the fastest player to reach 500 strikeouts in terms of innings pitched and how quickly he did it. In 2014, despite the Rangers not making the playoffs, Yu Darvish would go on to finish with a 10-7 record, holding a 3.06 ERA over the 144 innings that he pitched. He would allow 133 hits in those 144 innings, which is 11 less hits than innings pitched, so keeping that streak alive. He would strike out 182 batters, which is 38 more strikeouts than innings pitched. He would be named an All-Star for the third year in a row, just to give a sense of how good Yu Darvish was. And after missing the playoffs, he actually would miss the 2015 season completely after experiencing soreness in his right triceps. He would eventually have to undergo Tommy John surgery before returning in 2016. 2015, the Rangers would go on to make the playoffs and lose in the ALDS to the Blue Jays after Bannister won the Manager of the Year and Prince Fielder won the Comeback Player of the Year. But Yu Darvish would make his full comeback for the Texas Rangers in 2016. He would go on to start all 17 of the games that he would play in a season where the Texas Rangers would finish with a 95-67 record. That's the best record that the Rangers have had since Yu Darvish has been on the team. Yu Darvish would finish with a 7-5 record in the season in the 17 games he played. He finished with a 3.41 ERA over 100 innings pitched. He allowed 81 hits, which is 19 less hits than innings pitched. He also struck out 32 batters, 32 more strikeouts than innings pitched. He would not be named to the All-Star game, but once the Rangers made it to the playoffs, they would lose in the American League Division Series to the Blue Jays for the second straight year, actually. And then following that year, he would come back to the Rangers in 2017 for his age 30 season. In that season, he would start the first half of the year in Texas before getting moved to the LA Dodgers. For the entirety of the season, he would play 31 games. For the Rangers, he finished with a 6-9 record over 22 games, and with the Dodgers, he finished with a 4-3 record over 9 games. In total, he finished with a 10-12 record, and he helped the LA Dodgers finish with the best record in the National League West for the 5th year in a row, just to give a sense of where the Dodgers were that season. He was also named an All-Star for the 4th time in his career in the 5th full season that he had played. Over the 186 innings that he pitched with his 3.86 ERA, he allowed 159 hits, which is 27 less hits than innings pitched. He also threw for 209 strikeouts, which would be 23 more strikeouts than innings pitched. And in his first 5 seasons of pitching, that is, of course, the 4th time in the first 5 years he's thrown over 100. He's had more than 162, but he's broken the 200 barrier for the 3rd time in his career, which of course is one of the reasons why, of course, he was named an All-Star for the 4th time in his first 5 years. And at the conclusion of the season, once the Dodgers made the playoffs, they would go on to beat the Diamondbacks in the NLDS. This is the year that Cody Bellinger won the Rookie of the Year, by the way. They would beat the Cubs in the championship series in 5, and then they would lose to the Astros in 7, and I'm pretty sure in one of those games, or maybe 2 of those games, Yu Darvish might have lost him. And, of course, the Dodger fans quickly turned on Yu Darvish, I would say rather quickly. And then at the conclusion of the 2017 season, he would go on to sign with the Chicago Cubs. And he signed a 6-year, $126 million contract, which I think he's still playing on, which they traded him on. But he would go on to start in 2018, his age 31 season with the Chicago Cubs. In that season, he would start only 8 games in a season where the Chicago Cubs would go on to finish with a 95-68 record. They finished with the 2nd best record in the division, so they would go on to make the playoffs before losing in the wild card game to the Rockies. But regardless, in his very first season, Yu Darvish would finish with a 1-3 record with the 4.95 ERA that he had. In the 40 innings that he pitched, he allowed 36 hits. So this is still keeping his 6-year streak of seasons with less hits than innings pitched alive, and he struck out 49 batters in that span. So he was able to keep the strikeout streak as well. So he was definitely a player that mastered that ratio. And at the end of the season, like I said, they would end up losing in the wild card game. Following that, he would come back to Chicago for his 2nd season there, his age 32 season. In that season, he would start all 31 of the games that he would play in a season where the Cubs would finish with an 84-78 record. They won 11 less games than the previous season, and then they had gone and missed the playoffs completely. But regardless, in that season, Yu Darvish would finish with a 6-8 record on the season, holding a 3.98 record over the 178 innings pitched. That's the most innings he's pitched since 2017. After the season where he had been down for a bit, he would go on to allow 140 hits and 178 innings pitched as he struck out 229. So, of course, he was able to keep his streak alive, and this would go on to be the 4th time in his career he's had at least 200 strikeouts. That's actually the most recent time to date he's been able to log 200 strikeouts as well. And following that season, the Cubs would not make the playoffs. And following that year, he would come back to what would be his final full season in Chicago. In 2020, a season, of course, that was impacted by COVID. The season was shortened from 162 games to 60, as every team had to basically play every game within their own division. And they also had to expand the playoffs due to the season being shortened. And in that season, Darvish would go on to start all 12 of the games that he would play for the Chicago Cubs in a season where the Cubs would finish with a 34-26 record. They had the best record in the National League Central. So that was the first time they had actually won the division since Darvish had been on the team. In that season, Darvish would finish with an 8-3 record. He would lead the National League in wins. That's the only time in his career he's actually led the league in wins. He finished with a 2.01 ERA over the 12 games he played. In the 76 innings he pitched, he only allowed 59 hits and he struck out 93 batters. He allowed 17 less hits than innings pitched, and then he struck out 17 more batters than innings pitched as well. He will go on to finish 14th in the MVP voting as Freddie Freeman won MVP, and he finished second in the Cy Young voting as the Cy Young ended up going to Trevor Bauer of the Cincinnati Reds that season. But following that year, where he would actually go on to lead in fielding independent pitching, the first time he's ever led in that statistic. This is the season where they wouldn't name all-stars, but at the conclusion of the year, the Cubs would actually lose in the wild card round to the Marlins. They actually got swept 2-0. But following that season, Darvish would end up getting traded to the San Diego Padres. He and Victor Caratini were traded in exchange for Zach Davies and about 4 prospects. And ever since he's been at San Diego, the San Diego Padres fans have really kind of loved him as he's really kind of settled into a role of his own. Thus far, in 2021, he started all 23 of the games that he's played in a season where the San Diego Padres are currently holding on to what is now... or the San Diego Padres are holding on to what is now the third best record in the National League West. They now trail the San Francisco Giants by 10 games in the division, and they're holding on to the second spot in the National League wild card picture at the moment to give a sense of where they are. And Darvish himself, very responsible for... No, he's very responsible for the Padres being there thus far this season. He's holding a 7-7 record, holding a 3.70 ERA in the 23 games he's pitched. In the 131 innings he's pitched, he's allowed 105 hits, which is 26 less hits than innings pitched. And he struck out 158 batters, which is about 27 more strikeouts than innings pitched. So just to give a sense of where he is. And he was also named an All-Star for the 5th time in his MLB career. This is the first time since 2017 when he was in Texas as a Ranger that he was named an All-Star in his MLB career. And he definitely would have been named one last year, but regardless, his 5th time will be this year. With that said, that leads us to where we are right now as Darvish is continuing to show that he may be the determining factor on a team that looks like they may be a World Series contender, and Darvish may be the difference between them being in this position and them not. With that said, I want to, of course, thank Baseball Reference or Pro Baseball Reference. I want to thank the MLB and the ESPN websites for giving me the facts and figures that I needed for this episode. I, of course, want to wish Darvish a happy 35th birthday. I hope all is well. If you ever get a chance to watch him, he's wearing number 11 for the San Diego Padres. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 19 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. Once all of today's matchups and exhibitions are done, I'll come back with another daily episode tomorrow. And hopefully, if Darvish continues to be elite by the end of this year, I will find the kindness in my heart to drop another episode by this time next year. And hopefully, Darvish will have some more to talk about between this time and next year. And until then, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. I'll catch you guys with more on Darvish possibly next year.